Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have an early impression video on a brand new house to the channel. And you guys know I love talking about new houses and kind of sharing my first experience with a house because number one, it's a great well of knowledge to learn about new perfumers, new houses, new way of doing things, and also it's kind of an introduction into the house. Am I going to try to smell others from the house? Is the quality worth exploring more? That's the kind of thing I'm testing whenever I try a new fragrance from the house. And you guys have made it extremely easy on me. There have been many people who have sent me stuff, and I am eternally grateful. One of my perfume god people sent me this, and I've been playing with it for the last week or so. I wore it to bed yesterday. I'm wearing it as my scent of the day. It's LVDP Tabac. Now, this stands for La Via del Profumo. And La Via del Profumo is an Italian house. Actually, his website is literally profumo.it for Italy. It'll take you can either just translate to English or it'll take you to an American version of that site if you prefer. And this gentleman is a very interesting chap. He basically is one of Luca Turin's favorite perfumers. He's also someone who ended up choosing natural perfume. And I'll read you a little bit about him and the whole idea behind his brand. But first, we are going to do a very quick unboxing because I found a vintage version of a fragrance that I'm very taken with. And let me just show you. I'll show you the current version that I have and we'll compare it to this vintage version. I'm not going to spray it today, but I'll just show you the differences so you know what to look for. I ended up getting a really good deal on this. It's really the reason that I bought this because most of the versions of this, the sealed versions of this, were much more expensive, and I only paid $35 for this right here. So, like I said, I got an absolute steal, and let me just get this open. They put some tape on it to make sure it didn't kind of spray in transit. Okay, this is exciting stuff. So, first of all, let me show you the freebies that they kind of threw in here, and then I'll show you the fragrance, and 35 bucks is a steal for me. So what they threw in here was a House of Sillage. Oh, this is just like one of these. Yeah, I probably won't mess with this. I hate these things. You peel it and you're supposed to be able to smell it. Yeah, that's not for me. Let's see. What's this? This is Nest Fragrances. I have never heard of this. Rose, Noir, and Oud. Scent stick? A scent stick? Again, probably not for me, but it's a kind thought. All right, let me set these aside. So what I bought, and the reason that it caught my attention was, number one, how cheap it was. It didn't have a cap, which sometimes you have to sacrifice a cap for a great price. Like I said, most of the sealed versions, the vintage versions of this that I have here, if you find a sealed one, you're talking hundreds. I've seen them 100, 150, 200. I've seen some in the 250, 300 range. But it's a fragrance that's called Jean Patou Sublime. And Sublime came out in 1992. This is what the vintage version looks like right here. It almost looks like a little bit of an apple. Reminds me a little bit of the bottle from Dior, Poison. You know, if you've ever seen Dior's Poison, the bottles are sort of similar. This one came out in the 80s, though. This was the first version, and this is Jean Patou's beautiful bottle. This is a 50 ml. And you can see right here, it actually says Jean Patou right here along the collar, on the front and the back. And so normally there would be a cap. If you look on the bottom, it says copyright 1991. So this fragrance came out in 1992. And the version that I have is this one right here. This is a discontinued fragrance altogether. It was last marketed by Designer Parfums. And Designer Parfums version looks like this. This is what the Designer Parfums version looks like. And this is still a really good fragrance. So I looked at this and I was like, man, if I ever find a vintage version of Sublime, it's a Floral Chypre for women, but it's created by Jean Carlio, who we all know Jean Carlio makes some of the most amazing compositions. He's a fine French perfumer through and through. If you like the old Guerlains, the old Chanels, if that's kind of your style, if you like fine French perfumery, you should be all over the house of Jean Patou. And so it's a floral chypre with bergamot, green notes, coriander, mandarin orange, in the top, in the heart, carnation, orris root, jasmine, lily of the valley, lily, rose, ylang ylang, amber, oak moss, musk, sandalwood, styrax, tonka bean, vanilla, vetiver, cedar, and civet. So it's a animalic classic take on a chypre. That's the way that Jean Patou and Jean Carlio like to do things until they basically kind of kicked him out. They forced him to make an aquatic fragrance in the 90s, which is still a good perfume, but he basically retired and decided to go, live out the rest of his days. And he's still head of the Osmatech, if I'm not mistaken. So he's kind of in charge of making sure that the history of fragrances is kind of well kept, like a museum for perfumes. And they have formulas and stuff like that there where they can recreate scents of the past. So, but Sublime is one. One of these days, we will do a comparison video between the vintage version, which I'm so glad to have this, even without a cap. I can smell it from the atomizer. It smells amazing. And for 35 bucks, I mean, you can't get much better than that. I think I paid like 30 bucks for this 50 mil. This is 75 mil. But I'd much rather have 50 mils of the vintage. It is just sublime. Go figure. So I can't wait to kind of test this out. I'll probably wear this to bed tonight. Oh man, so glad to find that. So sometimes when you're a collector, that's how it goes. If you go searching for a vintage right now of that, you'll pay hundreds. And just put it on your radar. Keep an eye out for stuff that you're looking for. When you find it cheap, go for it. You know what I mean? That's how I pretty much built my collection slowly over time. So let's talk about this house now. The house itself, again, is called La Via del Profumo. However, if you look on places like Base Notes, they say that the house is called AbdesSalaam Attar. And what makes it even more confusing is the gentleman behind the house. His name is Dominique Dubrano. And he ended up changing his name to AbdesSalaam Attar. And this gentleman right here is a very interesting chap, like I said, because he is a convert to Sufi. So he's a Sufi convert. He's an Italian gentleman, but if you look at some of the pictures of him, you'll see that he's, wearing traditional Sufi, garb and stuff like that. And so there's some interesting quotes. I want to kind of give you some backstory on the house and the man and all that good stuff. And from his website, here's kind of what he says. Here's like the opening salvo into why he chose natural perfumes, if you will. And this is directly from the Profumo.it website. And it says, I have chosen to compose natural perfumes as someone chooses to work with rare gems and precious metals instead of plastic and colored glass beads. The first reason was that at the beginning of my professional life, I had strong allergies to some synthetic essences. The second is that I have always looked for the best at any cost, leaving out imitations, and in perfumery, the best is simply the natural. There was no ideology in my choice, but a discovery of the truth. An emerald is more beautiful than a piece of green glass. It's not a matter of taste, but of understanding. Children adore the kitschy costume jewelry of glittering glass and plastic, and there are true artistic masterpieces of costume jewelry made from these materials, but real ladies wear real jewels, and the bride will accept nothing more than gold rings or an eternal diamond. Natural perfumes, due to the very nature of the materials that compose them, are real olfactory jewels. Okay, so he's a very interesting character. There's actually a interview that he did with the very famous blogger Kafkesk, and I'm going to read you some blurbs from the Kafkesk blog because I think it really will sum up kind of his personality, and he's a very soft-spoken gentleman. She says that his answers are filled with poetic grace, thoughtfulness, and honesty. And, those are very similar words when I think of someone like Russian Adam. Getting to know someone like Russian Adam, I would put the same sort of words to someone like Russian Adam. Very thought-provoking and looking internally into our souls and really caring about his fellow man, all that good stuff that that you could apply to Russian Adam. It sounds like she's kind of applying those type of adjectives to AbdesSalaam Attar, which is what he goes by now. And so pretty lengthy interview. I would urge you to go read it. It's from 2015, but I think it's still, I can't believe 8 years are gone from 2015. It seems like yesterday, but this gentleman is one of Luca Turin's favorite under-the-radar perfumers. He received a couple 5-star reviews in Luca Turin's book, but there's some quotes that this gentleman has kind of given to Kafkas that I wanted to highlight. And so a couple of the quotes, the main one right on the headline of the article says, "The love of perfume springs from a quality of the soul, from a memory, or from a premonition of paradise." Very interesting quote. And so some of the questions that she asked, very high level, how did you get into perfumery? And he goes through this little answer. He says his perfume journey started when he left Europe and traveled to Africa and the Middle East, where they used perfumes in a completely different way, and they kind of really became part of his life. So long story short, I'll kind of condense the interview just really quickly, some high points for you guys. But he basically says that he took these real Mysore sandalwood and real patchouli and real ylang ylang and real oak moss and all this stuff, and just had handwritten labels on them, right? And he had handwritten labels on them, and I need to stop playing with this. It's getting all over. And what ended up happening is they got pretty popular. So he's been doing this since the late 80s, early 90s. He's been doing this where he was selling, raw materials basically in its natural form. And he caught a little bit of a cult following until he caught the eye of some bigger corporations that started competing with him. And he says that he couldn't compete with their pricing, but they couldn't compete with his quality. And so it kind of became this clash. And so that's when he started to learn about blending. And this is not somebody who is just mixing some essential oils together and calling it natural perfume. He is actually taking the time to formulate the, scents themselves, the archetypes of the scents, and going deeper into blending and compositions and stuff like that. And so interestingly enough, I'll read you the last line from that question. He says that making perfumes is easy. It's not hard, as people make it seem. He says the hard part, the real difficulty, is to formulate a scent that will be wearable using only synthetic chemicals, as the standard is nowadays. He says he couldn't do that. He says he couldn't do that. He tried and tried and continued to fail. But making the natural scents using natural proper materials, he said, was very easy. He says that making perfumes is a mental attitude, and especially with complex natural essences, that every perfumer will develop a method of his own that will reflect his vision of life, that you'll learn more about a perfumer's intimate self from his methods in making perfumes than from the story of his life. And he goes on to say, of course, costs of the very rare and expensive real natural materials. Like, for example, in 2015, a kilogram of iris root absolute was about 100,000 US dollars. Interestingly enough, he goes on to describe that iris root absolute as the smell of the head of a newborn baby. I've never thought about that, but I know exactly what he means. It makes perfect sense because a baby's head actually releases this type of smell for the mother. Whenever the baby's breastfeeding, the baby's head is right underneath the mother's nose. And he said something very similar about animalics. He said once he smelled the smell of, real deer musk, it was reminded of the smell of the skin of some people that he's actually smelled over his life, that there are some people that just exude these type of smells at different points in their life, right? And that your life memories have associated some sort of positive or negative emotions to those particular smells. And so it's like a biological way for us to remember them. And so he says that, the smells are memorized with positive emotions, and that our ancestors have transmitted genetically to us the memories of their most important emotional experience with smells. And he calls these smells archetypal smells. So smells such as fire and cattle and hay and the sea and earth and stuff like that. And so instinctively, when you smell these, you'll have this archetypal, this knee-jerk reaction to the smell. because it's kind of ingrained in us, in our DNA, if you will, instinctively. You'll know what the sea smells like, and what hay smells like, and what the earth smells like, and so forth and so on. And so he talks about using some of the rare ingredients, and he says there is a rule in natural perfumery. There is no natural essence that cannot hold up in a natural perfume. It is only a question of proportions. And he goes back to saying making perfume is easy. It's like cooking. It's even easier than cooking. And he's somebody who actually teaches perfume on his site. So, he teaches what blending natural perfumes would be like. He goes on to talk about musk deer. Like I said, he also said about the musk deer that smells like the noise of busy bees, which I thought was a very interesting way to describe. You can see he's kind of an interesting fellow, and he's caught the attention of some very important people. And a couple other quotes that I saw here. So he talks about the metaphor of distilling oneself is a Sufi teaching. It is the same metaphor as the philosophical stone of alchemy. Distillation is in fact a basic process of alchemy. And if we want, we can see the allegories in everything, because everything of the created world has several levels of meaning. It is just for us to open our eyes. So you can kind of see the type of person that he is, very deep, layered, multifaceted, and I'm a fan of what I'm smelling from his work so far today. So let's talk about the fragrance itself. Let's talk about the fragrance of Tabac. So Tabac, I don't know exactly the release date. It's not listed on either Base Notes or Profumo, so I have no clue when Tabac was released. All I know is that it is a unisex scent, and there's only 4 notes listed in Profumo. So they have tobacco, of course, tonka bean, vanilla, and cistus. Now, he sells his fragrances in 15.5 ml bottles, 30 ml, or 50 ml bottles, okay? And I think they're extrait, I believe they're all extrait de parfum compositions. And, whenever but I knew nothing about this brand, right? Zero. I've heard little bits and pieces talked about periodically. Brandon from Therapeutic Fragrances did a video on La Via del Profumo and did a pretty good job just overviewing the house. And I think AC from the channel Smells Good did a couple videos on some of his work. I think Milano Cafe was one of them that I really want to smell. AC really liked that one. And so, here and there over the years, I've picked up some bits and pieces, but there's actually only one video about Tabac itself on YouTube. And it was from My Mickers. Unfortunately, rest in peace. My Mickers did a video of this maybe 4 years ago, or something like that. And I think someone had given him a sample, just like someone gave me a sample. And he just got on there and said, hey, I have to talk about this. It's that good. So here's kind of what you get. In a nutshell, this is kind of like this resinous oriental take on tobacco. And when you first spray, every time I've kind of picked up little different nuances here and there. This is a very complex fragrance. You would think, oh, there's only 4 notes listed. It's a simple fragrance, and there's this simplicity and this complexity, and it reminds me kind of the man itself. So the opening first few seconds, you get this green camphor-like smoke, almost like you're smelling clean tobacco smoke, right? Not dirty, high quality tobacco smoke. And then that goes away and it changes. And you get this complexity to the tobacco. It never seems to overpower the fragrance, in my opinion. The tobacco does a great job of kind of always remaining in full power and control of the fragrance. To me, it seems like the tobacco is always kind of the focal point of the fragrance, but it never seems to overpower any of the other notes. It remains in the spotlight while allowing the other notes to shine. Not a very easy thing to do, I'll tell you that. From some of the tobacco fragrances I've smelled, sometimes they can seem very heavy-handed. Sometimes there's too much honey. Sometimes there's too much, tobacco itself. Sometimes there's not enough tobacco. Sometimes there's a tobacco fragrance, and they don't even list the note of tobacco, right? And this is one that really does a great job with balance. And, I know I've said how important balance is in fragrances over some of my previous reviews. And this reminded me kind of imagine like the ruler of a country, right? And he stays in power not by the iron fist, not by people fearing him, but just by cunning and intelligence and kind of his people loving him, right? And that's how he stays in power. That's what the tobacco reminds me of in this scent. Kind of like this cunning, insightful leader who owns this fragrance. The tobacco is the leader of the fragrance. And yet, the tobacco is smart enough to know that in order for the kingdom to work, all of the parts must come together. And they do come together on this. It's a beautiful scent. There is this indescribable freshness from the scent. And that's the part I was not expecting. Actually, I've now talked about 2 tobacco fragrances in the last week or two, and that both kind of had this freshness. I'll talk about the other one. I'll tell you a little bit about it right now. If you remember my previous review on the last tobacco fragrance I talked about on this channel, it was Santa Maria Novella Acqua de Cuba. And I wore that as my scent of the day during the father-daughter dance that we went to about a week ago or so. Actually, I think it was exactly a week ago from today. And, it had this, Santa Maria Novella had this citrusy cologne, kind of bright freshness to it, right? And I talked a little bit about that. Was a little bit of a shock to me. I wasn't expecting that. And this, even though it doesn't have the citrusy cologne style brightness of the Santa Maria Novella, there is this touch, there's a touch of that, but also you get a little bit more herbal cinnamon and freshness, open air freshness. The herbal cinnamon here smells like, almost you're smelling like cinnamon dust in the air. So imagine like you take a bag of cinnamon and like throw it up in the air, right? Make it rain with cinnamon. And you would expect kind of the dust particles to just spread all over the house, right? But it's different smelling than when you put your head into into the jar of cinnamon itself, right? Or smell the cinnamon stick itself, right? Throwing the powder up in the air adds like a different dimension in your mind, right? You think about it differently, right? And that's the way that the cinnamon here smells to me. It's like dust in the air, somewhat airy and fresh, while also taking on this kind of herbal aspect. And that herbal aspect, I'm guessing, is maybe some sort of mixture of like thyme and rosemary or something along those lines is what you get. And what makes it tough is this is an extremely nuanced scent. And even though the story of the fragrance is complex, but not heavy or done in a way that's going to bring you down. This is not a fragrance that will wear you down. This seems like it's a tobacco fragrance that can be worn anytime, any place, any weather, any gender. Anyone that wants to wear a fragrance like Tabac can wear this. This is easy. This is an easy wear. And what's crazy is if you close your eyes and you just kind of let your brain wander and think about kind of, the direction that you want the tobacco or the fragrance in general to go. Like, let's say you close your eyes and you say, okay, imagine that there is something fruity here. You can get it. You can get this plummy, fruity, apricot-y touch here. Imagine you close your eyes and think that it's smoky. You can get the smokiness. Sometimes in the opening, and I've sprayed the opening probably 5-6 times now. Sometimes in the opening, I will get this almost like cigarette smoke, but clean cigarette smoke. Sometimes you won't get any of the smoky facets. But if you kind of close your eyes and think about it, there is this cigar smoked, maybe like you're standing in a humidor, or maybe you're standing in a cigar shop where it's after hours and it's closed down, but there were people smoking in the shop previously, right? There's not smoke right next to you, but it was a place where over the years, lots of cigar smoke is just kind of absorbed by osmosis into the furniture and into the wood and into just the place that you're standing, right? That's the feeling of the smoky note to me whenever I smell Tabac. And if you want to think about the spices here play a huge role, especially in the first hour or hour and a half, let's say. The spices play a gigantic role. I couldn't even think about how many different spices are in here that aren't listed. It smells like there's a ton of spices. Yesterday I did a This Is Not a Top 10 video on the note of nutmeg. And you can get all of that. You know, you can get nutmeg, you can get pepper, you can get allspice, you can get just all of these different spices. You can get mace, you can get everything in here if you want. And if you want to think about it as resinous, close your eyes and imagine that the fragrance is resinous, you can get it. The cistus labdanum just like jumps forward and takes over the fragrance. And you can smell it as a resinous labdanum heavy fragrance. And labdanum is one of my favorite notes. If you want to think about it as woody, there are woody touches here for sure. Even though there's no wood note listed, I get a huge woody profile. Again, it smells like tonka meets maybe tobacco meets wood, right? And if you close your eyes again, you'll get this ambery facet. The vanilla mixes with the labdanum to give off this traditional ambery facet. My Mickers compared it to Amber Absolute. He said, imagine wearing Amber Absolute and then walking into a humidor. Now, I've never smelled Amber Absolute, so I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage. I would love a vintage bottle of Amber Absolute, but I refuse to pay those prices. You know, if I could find a bottle at a respectable price, I would love it, or a partial or something like that to have for the collection and to be able to show you guys, but the prices are outrageous. But Amber Absolute, he says, is what kind of the base smells like. And if this is what the base of Amber Absolute smells like, I think I would really like it. But again, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's just something that just popped in my mind. And one of the things I was not expecting, and I hinted a little bit at this earlier, but it's actually a big part of the fragrance to me, and the way I perceive this fragrance on my skin, is that the smelling of before actually smelling the perfume, if I imagined how it smelled, I was expecting a deep, dark, thick, heavy tobacco fragrance, right? Because of the you know, a lot of these indie houses, and I would consider him an indie house, so I would put him with the Arise Ladores, the Russian Adams, the Dmitry Bortnikovs, you know, the Taha from Agar Aura, the Ensars from Ensar Oud, right? I would put him in that category, but he's also different from that category because many of his fragrances, when I look at them, they have no real musk, they have no real oud, so they don't have those heavy, heavy base notes. And the thing that really shocked me about this fragrance is this airiness, this freshness to it. This, it almost reminded me of like you're smelling this airy, almost ambergris-like feel with the way that it interacts, especially with the spice. So the image that came to my mind, and this is going to sound a little bit nuts, but it's the only way that I can describe it and actually, I think, have the people listening picture what I'm trying to portray here. So instead of imagining ambergris as this sun sparkling off the water, you know, kind of like the way that I describe it in Ambre Supreme from Les Indemodables, right? Fresh day, ambergris is like this sun shining off the water, glistening, sparkling, blinding you in the eye. It's such a beautiful scene, right? There's this oceanic freshness to it. That's not how the ambergris smells here. Imagine more of this open air concept, right? And this open air, this freshness of the wide, wide world of nature, right? Now, imagine you could bottle that fresh ambergris of the open air and bring it home with you, okay? And open up your spice cupboard and shove that ambergris fresh air in there and shut the door before it could get out, right? And it's closed in your spice cabinet at home. Can't get out, right? And you go on vacation or something and you come back months later, maybe years later, and you open up that spice cabinet and you are hit with this blast of spice and fresh air from the ambergris accord. And now you add that tobacco humidor. So I can't say like my Mickers that it's, you know, Amber Absolute with humidor, because I don't know what Amber Absolute smells. But if I were trying to describe the way that the spice and tobacco blends, I would say take that ambergris accord, stick it in your spice cabinet, let it mature, you know, let it cook in there with all of the spices, You ever like smelled your grandmother's spice cabinet, like a spice cabinet that's been a spice cabinet for 40 years or something, right? And it just smells like the spices have just like ingrained themselves into the wood of the cabinet because they've been there for so long. Imagine that spice smell, but with an airy ambergris accord, and then you add the humidor tobacco-like feel. And the tobacco can be green at times. It can be it can be a fine tobacco, it can be smoky, it can be dry, it can be clean, it can be all of the aspects. And I'm thinking, and you can see how kind of excited I'm getting about this. I mean, I'm thinking that this is the type of reason, and this is the ideas as to why someone like Luca Turin loves this guy's work so much. That's what I'm feeling as I'm smelling this. I could see how someone who smelled thousands and thousands and thousands of fragrances and doesn't get excited by anything anymore. Nothing moves them anymore, right? They just kind of shrug when they smell something new. Like, like the Simpsons episode where they say, Simpsons did it, or what was that, South Park episode? I can't remember. But one of them where it's like, sorry, Simpsons did it. Anything that you try to do, the Simpsons already did. And that's kind of the feeling of I think somebody who smelled a lot of perfumes. And sometimes I feel like I fall into that camp. I smell these Xerjoff fragrances or something, and I'm like, nope, pass, nope, 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 pass. Or these Initio fragrances or Parfum de Marly's or, these fragrances that get hyped in the community. I'm like, nope, pass. And sometimes people give me a hard time for that. Like, you don't like Xerjoff, like I've offended them or something. But when you've smelled a lot of things, sometimes it just comes down to that point. And I could see how this would get someone excited that smelled a lot of things. I can completely see how there is this uniqueness to it. This air of being different. It's kind of sort of the same reason that I really like Russian Adam's work, except Russian Adam uses more of the ingredients that touch my personal soul, like the castoreum and the real oud and the real ambergris and the real musk and all that good stuff. I like all of those heavier animalic fragrance notes, right? And this guy seems to be kind of going down that road, but not using the real ouds. Now, maybe he does have an oud line. I think he does, but it's kind of separate from the main line, if you will. I've never smelled those. I would love to dive into the house more, but it's very expensive. I think 50 mils of a lot of these are like $200 or $225 or $250, or I can't remember, but it's not cheap, okay? It's expensive. And so yes, it's kind of one of those things where I would love to dive into the house more, but you can't own and smell everything. So as it goes deeper into the final dry down, that's where it brings in even more of these ambery notes. So as the hours tick by, as a couple hours turns into 4, 5, 6 hours, you're going to start to smell more and more of that labdanum being used. And that ambery labdanum heavy. Apparently, I've read some reviews on here that say that ambery labdanum heavy mossy dry down is something that he's really known for. That's a common theme across his fragrances. So, I can't speak to that because, again, I haven't smelled any others of his work. This is kind of like the first step through the door for me into the house. But if this dry down is kind of if this mossy, ambery type dry down is a familiarity to him and he uses it regularly, then yes, I could completely see how people would get hooked on this house because it's a beautiful type of dry down. And the downside for me with this is I was very worried about, let's say, longevity and stuff like that, because most natural perfumes, one of the hardest things to do is to get this projection, like you smell something that has isoe super in it, right? Or ambroxan or something like that, and it has this throw. It has this this drone. It just goes on, and it lasts forever on the skin, and people across the room can smell you and all this stuff. And with natural perfumes, it doesn't work that way. It's actually the opposite. People think, oh, you're using natural ingredients. That must mean it's going to be huge and be a beast. No, it's the opposite. It's the synthetics that are the beast mode. It's like when you grow a vegetable or something, or a fruit, when they don't use fertilizer, when they don't use these kind of, you know, Frankenstein-like fertilizers that make the fruits grow to the biggest sizes you've ever seen, they're actually much smaller. Normally, all natural fruits that are not used, that are not using the big, like I said, Frankenstein fertilizers, are smaller, not bigger. And so that's kind of the scent bubble and everything on this is pretty close to the skin. It doesn't really project a lot. If someone gets in your you know, your little personal space, they will smell you, but this is not going to reach out and grab people across the room. It's more kind of a personal thing for yourself. And that may turn some people off because nowadays people are so accustomed to a huge, loud, you know, if you like the big Middle Eastern style fragrances, you might not like this. But if you're somebody that wants to take the next step and you're tired of the same old crap that the big houses are pumping out, if you're tired of the stuff that L'Oreal and LVMH and Puig and all of these big monster conglomerates are pumping out using the same synthetics from the same oil houses, just repackaging it into something different year in and year out, and you want to kind of take the next step, this is a house that you can put on the radar. And you know what? I know going into these type of videos, this video won't get the views. Just go look at the views a week from now for this video versus, you know, the lists that I do. It'll be a quarter, a third, maybe even less, you know, 20% of the views this video will get, because everyone clicks on the list because it's a cool way to kind of hear about a lot of fragrances at once. And when you do these individual reviews, they don't get the talk. But I think it's very important to the community because there will be people out there like me. And I was going onto YouTube and typing in La Via del Profumo, Tabac, and seeing how few results there were, almost nothing. One full review, one review by Brandon of it with the rest of kind of 6 other fragrances from the house. And that's it. I mean, there was almost nothing on Tabac. And so I think these kind of videos are important. They may not get the views, they may not get the love, but I think it's important for the community, for the real frag heads. If it helps people, I feel like I've really done a justice, you know what I mean? And that's why I do this, for the community, because, you know, it does give you a sense of community, like you actually are contributing to FragCom, you know? You can think of FragCom like a giant, you know, well or something where you can take and you can leave things, but it's all of ours, right? And I've really enjoyed doing these videos for you guys, even though they're time consuming and all that stuff. I'm loving making these. So it's a new house for Channel Ram, La Via del Profumo or AbdesSalaam Attar, depending on how you would, you know, depending on which site you're on. The interview with Kafkes, I would highly encourage you to go read the interview with AbdesSalaam Attar. It's a beautiful, very long, beautiful, like, you know, something like 10 questions or something she asked him. And he leaves it with, there is nothing nearer to reality than love in this world and in the next one. And so it's a beautiful way to end. I'm impressed. I would definitely love to try others from the house. So if you have any familiarity or experience with La Via del Profumo or AbdesSalaam Attar, do let me know. If you tried some of the others from the house, leave it in the comments. Let me know if you tried Tabac or if you're interested in trying some from the brand. He has some very interesting starter kits. I was talking to Rich Mitch today, and he said, hey, I've never tried any of these, but I see they have some really cool, like frankincense and myrrh kind of starter kits or castoreum starter kits. And they have some neat little things where you can learn to tincture things. And so it's a neat little operation he's got going. He has perfume courses he does in Italy and all this stuff. So anyways, if you have experience, I'd love to hear down below. I love seeing your faces in the comments. Please do leave a comment if you watch the video and just to say hi, even if it's just say hi. You know, I love seeing your faces. I love the interaction. Leave a like on the video for the stupid YouTube algorithm. They like that stuff apparently, and it helps get the video out to more people, more people like us in FragCom. There are people out there, they just don't know that we're here yet, and so that's what the likes and the comments and the subscriptions help to do. It helps get the word out. get the word out to the other folks in Fragcom that are watching maybe some of the lesser perfume channels that hype up some of the stuff that they shouldn't be hyping for nefarious reasons. But we won't get into that topic today. We will just say that that it's a pleasure getting to know this house and getting to share it with you guys. And I hope to see you again very soon. I'm going to try to do a live stream, maybe today, maybe tonight I'll get a live stream in so we can test some more fragrances I've never smelled before. So thanks everyone for watching. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.